do a lot of carvings. Obviously, I mean, you guys have seen the videos of me on the lathe doing the carvings into the turned projects and whatnot. But I do a lot of them where there's no turning involved. There's a block of wood and then cut out a shape, or even just start with chisels right out of the block. But I've never actually done videos on any of those. I mean, I've done, like, I did the dragonfly video, but I didn't explain anything I was doing. I just kind of did it and put it on high speed and let you guys watch it. Same thing with, like, the little goddess statue I did. So I decided I was going to go ahead and do one of the small carvings and show you, or explain to you, how I go about doing them. I'm going to be starting with making the pattern. I mean, going from picture to the drawings to put onto the block to follow, and then we'll cut out on the bandsaw and then carve away at it. But I wanted to actually go through step by step on how these things are doing. So this is going to be a whole series. This is not a single throw project. So what I'm going to start off with is the device used to copy the photo into a pattern. It's called a pantograph, I believe. Anyway, it's a set of zigzag arms, and there's a follower point, and then there's a pencil at the end, and then a stationary point. And if you follow, like, take a picture of a, well, I think for this video series I'm going to use a dog. I have little statues of dogs, and I've taken some pictures of one of them, and I'm going to turn it into a pattern and then carve it. So anyway, you take this little dog picture and you can follow the outline of it, and over here where the end of the pantograph is, where the pencil is, it multiplies it, so it makes it work. So starting off, this pantograph will do 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, and 5 times size. So give me a second here and I'll get set up and we'll get started on it. So I don't know if you can see the pencil lines on the film or not. It's, the screen here is pretty small. They're there in my view. But anyway, this is basically the plans for the pantograph. So, and then right here is my block of wood to do it. Now, I'm not quite sure if this is river birch or maple, but either one is fine. It just needs to be a good closed grain wood. I've made them out of oak before, and they tend to split because they end up really thin, the slices do. So, but next we're going to go over and I'm going to mark this out. And I will explain the markouts once I've got them transferred. I think you'll be able to see them better because I'm going to use a marker to do that. Okay, so I've got them marked out. Just got a line down the center of the edge of the board. The first mark is 3/8 inch from the end. The next mark is 2 5/16 inch from the first one. And each mark after this is actually measured from the last mark. So 3/8, 2 5/16, 9/16, and then 1 inch, 2 inch, and then this will be 5 7/8 from this one. So what you end up with is this is actually your 2 times, this is 3 times, 4 times, and 5 times when you set it all up, which we'll get to that once we've got it made. First thing I'm going to do is use a punch, which I have laying around here somewhere. There we go. And actually get little points so my drill bit doesn't slide around on this wood. And then we'll go over here to the table saw. I mean, drill press. Ha! Yeah, that's not a table saw, is it? Oh, it could be. It's a shopsmith. Alright. The drill bit is 3/16 of an inch, because I'm going to use 3/16 inch bolts on it. for the pivot points. Alright, so now all the holes are drilled. And now we go to the table saw and we'll rip off probably 3/16 of an inch on each one, and then we're going to sand them a little bit. And then we'll cut the lengths for each of the pieces, the sections that are needed. There's like one that's shorter, that's this piece, and then there's one that goes from here to here, and differences like that. And then we'll make the pencil holder and the pivot point. So now we got 4 pieces. All the holes are in the same places, guaranteed. So we can go ahead and make our little doodad. And this block, there's only about 1/4 of an inch of a hole left in that, so I'm going to use it to make the pivot block and the pencil holder. So not too bad. Oh, and I misstated earlier, I said 3/16, I meant 5/16, and then I'll sand them down to about 1/4. I'm going to sand each side of each one of them, so it'll be about 1/4. You want to make them fairly soft, smooth, so that when they're pivoting against each other, they do so smoothly when you're drawing. Alright, so on to the next stage. So the first 2 stay just like they are. The second 2 are going to get cut down. 3/8 from the hole that they're supposed to get that cut down on. So this one I'm going to go to that hole and 3/8 over from it, from the center of it. That's my cut line. And then this one's getting cut 3/8 past that hole. Can't see that. Actually, it doesn't have to be exact, but since I have the ruler here, right? And I think I did that at about 1/2 inch. Even the 1 inch mark. Yeah. Now I'm going to go snip them off, and then I'll be right back again. Okay, so I went over and snipped my 2 little pieces, and while I had them in, I went ahead and sanded them and eased the edges so they're not sharp. I didn't mess with the ends yet because I do that at the very end when I'm doing these. I've made more than one, but my last one I did out of oak. I don't know, I may have mentioned that already, and the end of it split where it goes on the pivot. I did mention that. Anyway, so now we're going to make the pivot and the pencil holder. So let's start with the pencil holder. The pencil holder goes out here on this end. So this hole is going to get re-drilled to 5/16, but we got to have a way to hold the pencil on there. So what I did was that's a good place to do this. I just took and went, about 3/4 of an inch, and then maybe 3/4 of an inch back, and I just kind of made an angled block, round it off a little bit. And then we'll drill a hole there and bandsaw that out, drill that hole, and then we'll split this back to within just a little bit of this. And what that lets me do is I can drill a small hole through the side with a 3/16 inch bolt, drop the pencil down through there, and then tighten that bolt, and it pinches it. And it works great, you know, holds the pencil still. I used a mechanical pencil because constantly trying to take the pencil out and sharpen it and as such is kind of a pain in the rear. So use a mechanical pencil, you can just reach over and click it whenever you're starting to get your lead's starting to get short. Okay, then we need the pivot. Now, the pivot kind of depends on what the length of the bolts going through the two pieces and how far they stick down. Let me grab a bolt so we can determine that. Okay, so here's my bolts, and then these are the hex nuts, and I put one all the way up against the head. Wait a minute, no, I don't have to do that. That was on the old style. We just put them on the bottom. I put a pair of them on the bottom and lock them against each other. So there's that and that. So this kind of determines the height of your pivot point, which is going to be one of these back here will be the pivot point. That one will get drilled out to 1/4 inch and sanded on the inside so it's a little bit loose, and I'll use a 1/4 inch pin in the top of the pivot box. But this gives us the height of the pivot. Can you see that? No, of course not. So we're just going to put that right there. If this rides a little bit up on the pin, that's okay, but what you can't have is have this pushing the whole apparatus up. Then it won't work right. So we're going to take that, and our pivot's going to, our hole for the bolt will be right there, not bolt, but pin will be right there. And then what I did is I kind of brought it down and made a flat area. I'm going to round it off a little, whatnot. And then I can take a clamp and clamp this on. You can use double-sided tape under it. If you're going to have it in a location where you never have to move it, you could use double-sided tape. I move mine around all the time, so I just use like a spring clamp or a C-clamp and clamp it onto the edge of the desk. Works great. So we're going to go over to the new bandsaw and cut out these pieces. I almost forgot I had to drill the holes first. I actually walked up and touched it up against the blade and went, oh wait a minute, I better drill those holes first. So I got my 3/16 inch hole through the side, a 5/16 inch hole through the edge, which that'll be the pencil hole, so it goes clear up inside of there. And then this has a 1/4 inch hole in it that's going to hold the pin, and it goes in about an inch or so, 3/4 of an inch or so. And now we'll cut them out. So now I'm going to take them over and sand them up. I'll wait to cut that split until after I've got it sanded, and I might even just glue it on there first and then split the board too. We'll see how that works out anyway. So, onto the sander. I won't throw that part up on the video. That's kind of overkill. You know how to sand. Okay, so I got all my pieces cut out, drilled, sanded, and I went ahead and cut the bolt, or not bolt, but pin for the pivot. So that actually clamps down to your desk, or you can double-sided tape it, like I said before. And then I drilled out the pivot point with a 1/4 inch bit. Now remember, the pivot point's the one closest to the two that are real close together here, at number 4 and number 5 expansion, and then that goes right on there, and that pivots like that. And then there's 4 more pivots out here before you get to the pencil, but we'll get to that when we get inside. This is going to be my pencil holder. So in order to make sure everything's lined up, I'm going to stick my drill bit that I used to drill the hole in there. First we'll get a little glue going. Got a little bit in the hole. Let me grab a paper towel. Okay. I'll push that up there. And squeeze him down. Make sure I got plenty of glue. Yep. And then I'm just going to put a clamp on it. and let that set for 20 or 30 minutes. Now, I'm going to go inside and put all the bolts together on it, and I'll film that too, but I'm not going to film this part. But next I'll go ahead and snip that off on the bandsaw and split this up to about right in here, and that'll make this plenty flexible so that when I put a bolt through here I'll have a wing nut on it and I can tighten it down, and that'll tighten up on it. Nice and handy. I'll also sand this down so it's all nice and flush. Probably if I glued this on the other side it would have lined up perfect. My center line obviously wasn't quite perfect. That's alright. Not going to hurt the function of the tool. Okay, we're back inside where it's nice and warm, or I'm back inside. You're still at your place watching this on YouTube, right? So we've got all our parts together now, and we're going to assemble it. I've got this all sanded. I split it on the bandsaw. It's as good as I'm going to make it. And I have a selection of wing nuts, cap nuts, and nuts that fit the bolts. And I've taken one of the bolts and ground the end down to kind of a ball tip. It's, I don't know, maybe a little flat on the end. This is going to be the pointer when you're tracing a drawing out, or tracing a picture and turn it into a drawing and expand it, enlarge it, whatever you want to call it. So one of the wing nuts is going to be for the pencil holder. And really, if you're using mechanical pencil of the type that I'm using, you don't really need this because they fit really tight. This had like a little rubber sleeve on it, and I peeled that off, and I mean it fits nice and tight. So I don't know exactly where that needs to be yet. I'll have to get it assembled before that, so I'll leave it out for now. So, okay, fun stuff. Now getting it all figured out. There's my pivot block. Here's my pivot. That's the first one. Now it's going to go up there. My long arm is going to connect to it. So I'm going to drop a bolt through that, and then through that. And put a nut on him. Now I use a nut and then a wing nut on the ones that get changed. This one does not change. This is always bolted right here. The adjustment happens here and here. So, and your pointer is going to be out here between these two. So on this one and the pointer, you can just use two regular nuts because you don't have to move them when you change your sizes. And I've got my little wrench, and a pair of needle nose pliers seems to work well. The wrench gets on the top one. And so you don't want this to be tight on the wood, you just want it to be loose enough that it still turns, but tight enough that there's not a lot of slop in the joint. Okay? So now you got that, you take one of your cap nuts, and you're going to stick him on the bottom of him. That's just to give it a smooth surface to ride on. Like so. Got it? So that's easy enough. Now, the next bar will be this little guy, and he's going to connect right here, or here, or here, or here. And I'm going to put this on the 2x thing for the video here. Oop. One thing to note, if your pencil bar is under there, then this one needs to be under here. That will kind of help things in the end. Okay. And then put him up there. Now this one does get moved, so I'm going to put one of these and then a wing nut to make it a little easier to get it undone when I work on it later on. Doesn't have to be super tight, just enough, again, so that there's no slop in the joint. Okay, and then this one goes with these holes up here, and here is your pointer. So that's my pointer. As a side note, and I'll probably do this later on, like tomorrow when I'm out at the shop, is cutting this back so it's fairly close here makes it a lot easier to see the pointer. I just forgot to do that. So we get that one, and this one will get 2 nuts. Oh, and we still need a cap nut on that one. Well, we just put the wing nut on. Okay. That one will give a good tweak. Alright. And then the last one. So this one will ride here, or here, or here, or here. Whatever the same holes are, these sets line up. So we're going there. And I just dropped the pivot. No biggie. Oop. Yay. Alright, so this one is also another one that moves, so it's going to get another wing nut. And a cap. By moves, I mean it gets put into different positions to change the multiplier to make your drawings bigger. Yep. Nice and free. Last of the cap nut. Okay, let me grab that pivot that I just dropped. Okay. Oh, I brought me a spring clamp in here. There it is. Alright, so here's the idea. Can you see that? Nope. Okay. This gets clamped to the bench. This slides onto here. And now the whole thing moves like that. We put the pencil in. Until it just touches the desk surface. A little further. And we can tighten up our pencil holder. If the pencil were actually loose, but you know, got it on there, might as well use it. So to use this thing, to make your pattern, you take a picture, or at least I'm going to use a picture. You could use there's lots of carving books out there that have patterns in them, and the patterns are of course on a page, and they're so small that small carving is actually more difficult than a larger one. A detailed carving, okay? Smaller one's actually more difficult than the larger one. So you take your carving book and you make a photocopy of the pattern that's in it that you want to expand, and then you can actually lay it down. You put the pointer on a specific spot on it and move your paper that you're going to trace it onto so that that spot corresponds to a ratioed area, and then you start drawing. you drag this pencil around out here on the paper, but you're watching the pointer. So it's kind of neat because you're not seeing what you're drawing, you're just following the pointer, and then all of a sudden you stop and you look over and it's like there's a drawing enlargement of what you were just looking at. So to show you what I mean, this is one of the carvings that I want to do. I don't know how well you can see that, but it's a little pug. He's kind of a cute little guy. Let's see here. There we go. See his little face there? Anyway, I'm going to trace his face out with this thing and show you how right now his head is about 7/8 of an inch tall, and outside of the ears is about an inch, a little over an inch. So what you do, you grab a piece of paper. Okay. So we pick a spot in the middle of his chin, or at the corner of his chin. How's that? Like that. And then I'm going to clamp down my pivot point so it doesn't move as I move it. That's funny. And you do have to hold the paper still, so I got one end of it clamped over here, and I'm just going to tape the other corner down to the desk. It's a melamine desk, it'll handle it. And then I'm just going to put a little piece at the top and bottom of my drawing paper to hold it still. And then I'm going to put the camera on time lapse because this does take a moment, and I don't really need to drag it out for that much for you guys. And there you go. So I just turned his little, what, 3/4 by 7/8, or 3/4 by an inch head, 7/8 by an inch head, into a 1 7/8 by 2 1/8. So doubled his size. Like I said, he was just a little over an inch wide. He's 2 1/8. That's just like perfect, man. Awesome. Now, let me zoom in a little bit on what I just drew. Hopefully you can see it. There we go. So, once you get to this point, this is where some artistic skill is helpful. You can go back in and kind of draw it in, smooth things out, whatnot. This reminds me so much of Doc, I'm telling you. He was asleep on the floor behind me, by the way. At this point, anybody becomes a great artist. I'm telling you, if you have a whole outline to follow, it's easy. Or easier, right? And if you want to really get fancy, you can fill in your shading and whatnot. But I'm not going to worry about it too much. I do mostly patterning. Turn a picture into a drawing, put the drawing on a block of wood, cut it out, and then carve this. So I need these lines in his face to follow with the chisel and whatnot, but I don't actually need, you know, shading, although it's helpful. I do usually keep the photo handy too when I'm carving to kind of reference, but I'll make this and all the other drawings on this paper and then photocopy it several times. And then one set of those I'll cut apart and actually use as the templates for the block that I'm going to cut out. And then the other ones I'll keep and I'll use them to take measurements off of with the calipers as I start the carving process, you know, because now I can figure out, you know, how far it is from the tip of his nose to the edge of his head. I've already bandsawed this part, so that helps me figure out where the tip of his nose is, and I can mark that. So we'll get into that more in another video. This one has gotten to be plenty long, but there you go. Interesting little tool, fun to make, fun to use. For those of you that have kids or grandkids or whatnot, these are fun for them too. My nieces and nephews love to play with these things. So, have a nice one, guys. See you next time.